It's time for All Hands on Tech.
Climb on board as hosts Amina and Isaac explore all of the amazing things happening in Nova Scotia's tech sector. Each episode, we will chat with local experts to uncover the secrets of what makes Nova Scotia the best place for collaboration, innovation, and creativity.
All Hands on Tech is proudly produced by Digital Nova Scotia, the industry association for Nova Scotia's growing tech sector. On that note, welcome to All Hands on Tech.
I love it.
We're really excited to have you both here today.
Thank you.
And, both yourselves, Peter and Sam, I want to give you both the opportunity to introduce yourselves and maybe introduce Shortstop a little bit and all the amazing things that you're doing.
No, you go first.
Sure. Okay. So hi, my name is Sam Archibald, and I'm here with my business partner, Peter Woodward, and we together are the creative agency Shortstop. So we typically work with clients through marketing, advertising. Oftentimes that involves the digital world these days, and we've been in operation for just over a year now, based here in Halifax.
I'm going to try and do the condensed version here because I can talk about it for a long time because there's a lot of tangents to go off of.
Go off. This is your time.
Yeah, listen, we facilitate the podcast, but this is your time to tell us everything.
I went to school to NSCC for software development to become, back in the day, I was like, I'm going to build some piece of software that somebody's going to install on their computer via CD-ROM. I don't know why CD-ROM was always in my head. I'm like, that's how they're going to get it there, and that's what I'm going to do, which is laughable nowadays because what computers even have disk drives anymore like that?
Yeah.
And then I landed a job that was in web development, which was close, but it was kind of it was the work placement piece of NSCC that was required that I ended up starting in web development and stuck with it because it was kind of fun, a little different. I had a ton of autonomy where I was the first in-house developer. So I stuck it out there for a little while. That company made a transition to go less from being a web shop and more into being a marketing company. And that's when I was kind of like, well, this is kind of cool too. Left that job. So I went to a different agency and was there for another 6.5 years. I was at the first one for about 5 years. And then that's where I met Sam. And from there, we just kind of had a conversation one day about just like what would it be like if we left and started our own thing, and that was it.
Yeah.
The rest was history.
The rest was history.
Yeah.
Was it that you guys made really good friends at the last agency, or you just found that you worked well together? Like, is it a personal friendship or just really good business bromance?
I'd say it's probably a lot more of a business bromance. We're both pretty similar in the sense that we can be really focused on the work. But, that business bromance has definitely evolved into a more personal friendship, I would say.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I think we're both pretty focused. And if you were to talk to Peter and I separately, like there's a little bit of a yin and a yang approach to it. He's got a family, 2 kids. I have a husband and a cat, and we definitely aren't cut from the same cloth in every ways. Like the diversity of the way we approach problems is why I felt like it was strong to have him as a business partner. And my background, where Peter was started in the kind of the software development and digital development space. My background was definitely a lot more in the creative side of things. Mm-hmm. So I went to NASCAD here in Halifax for a few years, and then ended up finishing up my university degree in Ontario at OCAD, focusing on an advertising program. So that was quite interesting for me. And that space has always been sort of something that Peter and I get excited about, is kind of making cool stuff and doing that in the pursuit of commerce and what we can do for businesses to help them grow and be attractive to people that aren't necessarily even thinking about why I want to buy a donut from Tim Hortons. But when somebody slaps Justin Bieber on on the advertising for it, it can have a huge impact, right? And so the people that can come up with that thinking and those ideas are sort of why we got into this business. So
Sweet.
I think that's awesome too. Like you reference like the yin and yang thing. Like I think it's really important when people do get together to create a business or organization, what have you. They aren't carbon copies of each other, because you need to power off of each other's strengths and also, reflect on each other's weaknesses at times.
Yeah, I don't think it can work as well if they were carbon copies, because inevitably you're just going to end up stepping on each other's toes.
Yeah.
And that was kind of something that we found really interesting and we talked to a few people before we launched, actually other agency founders. We talked to 5 different agency founders from across the country before we launched. And every time we had the conversation of like, well, so like, okay, Sam, your background is in advertising. So Peter, what's your background? And I'd say, well, I'm a software developer. And they'd be like, that's a very odd pairing, but it might work. Because
I'd say it works perfectly.
Because there's no overlap, especially getting started. It was like we could cover a lot more ground in what services we could offer by being 2 than, if we did have a bit more of a similar background. So.
And how did you guys come up with the name Shortstop?
That was, really we were spitballing a whole bunch of ideas about what could potentially represent us and what we wanted to build. And I knew that Peter is a big fan of the Blue Jays and the world of baseball in general. And so I started thinking about, okay, what does ideas that fall into that space sound like and look like? And for some reason, the position of shortstop always interested me, even as a kid when I played baseball. But just this notion that somebody kind of straddles the line between the outfield and the infield was really important to us. And then also that they are typically a strong defensive player. They have to have a good sense of everything that's going on in the field. Yeah. And then broader from that, for us, this notion of being a member of a client's team, so playing one position on a team versus trying to do everything for somebody, and also that we really see ourselves as, a member of that client's operation and their organization, whether that's the marketing team, whether that's the IT team, whether that's the executive team. We need to be thinking about ourselves not as a service provider or as a supplier for our clients, but really as a partner and a team member. And so that's the genesis of the name and where it comes from. Did I summarize that well, Peter?
Yeah, it's one of those things that we get asked that a lot. And I wish it had a more fun origin story, but it really was very much just like spitballing ideas. And I remember saying when we were going through it, I was like, well, Sam, if you're going to start naming baseball positions, I'm going to try and pick one of them. And then we, for whatever reason, when you named shortstop, Sam, it clicked in my head and I was like, hold on. And the search, it all just made sense. It was like, okay, here's all the reasons why the shortstop exists and all that. Plus, try and go a day without making a baseball analogy. It's so fun. It's just a lighthearted kind of fun name that kind of
and
works
hearing
for us
about
as well.
your dynamic and what you both have your individual expertise in and what a shortstop is in the world of baseball, I feel like it's super relevant and it goes really well.
It's very complimentary.
So kudos to you both on finding the perfect
I know you both
name.
are being so humble, being like, oh, it's not that interesting, and we're like,
No.
really creative.
We
It
dig
could be
it.
like,
Appreciate that.
Sam and Peter's marketing agency,
Yeah,
there could
that
it could be a lot worse.
You would have been booed off the stage with that one.
If anything, we wanted to create the vibe of a space that people, it wouldn't feel like we take ourselves too seriously, or also if, when we're looking to build out our team and find, talented people who want to come work with us, if it felt like it was more like a fun kind of pickup of baseball versus this super serious, we are, innovation incorporated creative. For us, it was more about just kind of getting back to every instance we've been in a project with a client. It doesn't matter how creative you are, how technical you are with your code. If you're not able to work with other people in a really natural way or kind of communicate with others and work together as a team, you can't actually produce anything. So that was the differentiator for us and the reason why kind of that whole idea of teamwork was important to us in building the team.
Yeah, awesome.
So we got some
Yeah, go ahead.
rapid fire questions for you.
sure.
And what we'll do is, since there's two of you, we'll ask like one, and then Isaac will ask the other.
Yep.
And then there's like 5, so then you both can answer the last
If
one.
for whatever reason, if we ask another person a question and you feel very strongly that you want to give an input, feel free. We're not holding you too strongly to them.
The first one, I'll direct it to Peter. Romantic comedy or thriller?
Romantic comedy.
Mac or PC?
Mac.
Okay. Bagel or toast?
Toast.
The next one is WordPress or Squarespace?
Oh, Peter's going to get really mad if I say the wrong answer here.
I know.
I'll say WordPress.
Does that check out for you, Peter?
I will say either.
Okay.
Okay.
Fair.
Cool.
Fair.
Cool. And you both can answer this one because this one's kind of super fun. Model of the first computer you ever had?
Mac 2.
Wow, you just went right in there with
Back
that.
in the day.
Okay.
Amina asked because when we were writing these questions, she wrote that down, and I was like, I can't remember what my first computer was.
Yeah, Apple 2.
But
Apple 2. Back in the day.
You knew that
like
almost
so
instantly.
fast.
I say Mac 2. Like, not going to date myself, but it was an old computer by the time I was starting elementary school.
Sam, do you
All right,
remember?
Do you remember?
I had to look it up really quickly while he was answering that.
That's what you were doing.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say I saw the phone come out really sneaky, and I was like,
I'm probably a little bit older than all of you, but the first one for me was mid 90s, and it was I think it was a 486, a Pentium 486.
I don't
So,
even know what
Yeah,
that is.
it might have had like 16 megabytes of like hard drive space.
yeah.
Which is kind of insane to think about right now, but like I've kind of on that cusp of, I can remember when we first got 14.4 internet, like dial up. I don't think any of you maybe.
Oh, I had
yeah.
dial-up
Okay.
internet, and I remember the tone.
Oh,
I
yeah.
won't embarrass myself and do it over the mic,
No.
but I remember what the sound was.
Yeah.
I want you to make the noise. Yeah.
Hard pass.
Yeah.
I'll get like a soundboard or something. And,
You don't want to hear me screech over
Yeah.
the mic.
Yeah, but I remember like that having such a big impact on like, I mean, I'm of the age where I remember going to my school elementary and them having encyclopedias in the library.
Yeah.
And it's you kind of referenced this already too, but it's a very weird dynamic. Like anyone born even like early 90s, even late 80s, like we all kind of had the same childhood growing up because there was such a stagnant period from like 1995 to like 2003
Yeah.
where there was like so much growth but also like no growth.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's interesting to think that like the 1980s and the 70s are so long ago, but that, the 1990s were just almost like
Yeah.
20 years ago. Like that's
Yeah.
still very
Oh,
bizarre.
it hurts my head.
Sobering.
When someone told me, they were like, yeah, I was born like 2010, I was like, what?
Oh.
That's not a real birth
You
year.
can talk?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
They're quick. They're learning quick
Yeah,
today.
exactly. Yeah, kids these days, my goodness.
So let's jump into some other, like, not rapid fire, but general questions. And specifically because you folks spoke about the bromance of the business world and the tech world. So
Yeah.
how do you feel the tech community is here in Nova Scotia, and what can we do to build and foster a stronger community? Because I know tech can be super isolating, working behind a computer all day, not necessarily
Especially
needing
the
that
past few years.
in-person feature. Let's chat about this.
Yeah, I mean, like to answer the first part, I mean, we in Halifax are exploding from a development standpoint. I feel like there's tech everywhere. It's sort of what is tech? I'll kind of is the first question, I guess. But if I look at it purely like sort of in line with what I went to school for, is like writing code and being a developer. There's a ton of opportunity. I think I'm probably the weirdest person to ask that question to, because I've built a career so far on not being the stereotypical developer. And what I mean by that is from a technical standpoint, I do have the capabilities, but I know, especially when I was in school, there was this sort of vision of what a developer looked like, and they were like, you know, you couldn't possibly understand what I'm doing, and there was that attitude of like, I'm smarter than you. Like, it's like I could not build cabinets, so that doesn't mean that I'm stupid. That doesn't mean that, you know, I should be treated that way, and so therefore why should I treat somebody else just because they're in a different industry that they don't know what I do? If this comes down to, like, you know, inclusion in tech, but you know, there was once upon a time where you could say, what does a developer look like, and be pretty darn close to what you know you could describe.
I mean,
but just having that extra diversity means there's a diversity in personality as well, and that's why I feel like it's getting better.
any thoughts, Sam? Like, what's the tech community like in Nova Scotia? And do you guys chat? Are there forums?
It's hard. I mean, hard to answer in the sense that Peter and I, you know, we definitely operate within more on the marketing side of that tech lens. So I would say that, you know, there's good conversations that can be had between people within the industry that we operate in, but where we are kind of this creative advertising, marketing, technology agency, it's not always like, I wouldn't say that I feel extremely connected to the local tech community. However, I think organizations like Digital Nova Scotia are perfectly primed to kind of help foster more of that community. One of the things that we've recognized over the last, I don't know, decade that we've worked in this industry is that it is very insular, at least on the marketing side. There is a lot of people that we know. When it comes to tech and how tech incorporates into marketing day to day, there is sort of a cutoff, though. And I would say that the spaces that need to be opened up for more people in tech are often still kind of looked at as either tokens or not necessarily, you know, even given the same opportunity that, you know, somebody that is more, I'm going to say, traditionally cis, traditionally white, traditionally male is given in this space. So for Peter and I, it was important when we started this business that we thought about, okay, what do we want to kind of leave in the reason why we're here? I mean, if we picked up and moved to Montreal or moved to Toronto, that would be fantastic. But I think one of the things we both love about this place is that there is, you know, a great work-life balance to be had in Nova Scotia. And I think the more that we can attract really great clients as well as really great talent to kind of stay and work here, the better. And then just to pick up on the idea of, you know, how important diversity is to our business, for us, diversity of thought is kind of what gives us the strength to be able to bring clients new ideas and new thinking. So if we don't have diverse voices or diverse people in our spaces working with us, then, you know, we are not going to last. And that's kind of how we view it. Now, that may come across as very kind of just, again, speak from somebody who's in a position of power and has a lot of privilege to be able to say these things. Although I think for Peter and I, the actions we're trying to take, whether it's, you know, not just looking at, okay, how do we give opportunities to all different types of people so that they can get in on the ground floor, but then looking at, you know, what's the legacy? There's a lot of organizations out there right now that are trying to increase diversity, whether it's visible diversity with people of color across Canada in our industry, or Peter and I have been involved with an organization called Pride AM, which is Pride Advertising and Marketing here in primarily Canada. We actually just finished up a report for them. And you know, one of the depressing things that came out of that report, it was done in 2019, so before the pandemic, was that, you know, there's little to no trans individuals working in the advertising world. So for us, that's like, to me, that's a red flag, but also it gives us the opportunity to, how do we create spaces for that? So whether those people don't feel comfortable enough to share this opportunity, or to, you know, just be a part of the industry that we're a part of. I think it's a lot of work systematically to change in order to increase the community here in Nova Scotia. We just want to play one little part in it. And I think at least we recognize that there is room to grow. Because I would say that right now, it is very easy to get lost behind your computer screen.
Solid, all valid. And to your point where you said that, you know, you're not sure if you're the one to speak on it. You are the one to speak on it because you're the one that has to make space for the people who don't even have the platform or the opportunity to speak on it. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it's to everything that you mentioned as well, and kind of segueing into your next question pretty perfectly. We've been having a trend here on the podcast that whatever we talk about or whatever the guests mention, it always segues, and I'm like, yes, so nice. So maybe we could dive in a little bit into some of the really cool projects that your team has done. And I know most relevantly, as we're recording this, I know you both have worked pretty closely with Halifax Pride, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure how in detail you can go with that, but
Sure.
Any projects associated with Halifax Pride or other projects you want to talk about?
With the Halifax community in general,
yeah.
anything you can speak
Nova
to.
Scotia, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So 2 projects come to mind for me. One is Halifax Pride. So I've been involved with that organization for a number of years, and they've thankfully given us the opportunity to kind of continue to work with them each year on what their festival theme is. This year in particular, we worked with them on, trying to go back to a time and a space where Pride hasn't always necessarily, or for the last few years, hasn't necessarily been able to exist for everybody in the physical presence that people are familiar with. Let's say the Pride Parade, which is oftentimes what people think about when they think about any sort of Pride organization, or it's the Pride Festival or Pride Parade. We got to go watch that. So it's been really fun for me and for Peter to kind of work on that with that client in order to, again, dig deeper. It's not necessarily about everyone having a party, and it's not always necessarily about everyone somberly reflecting, but it's kind of a mix of both. So yeah, the project in particular, we worked with them. We were able to organize and shoot a number of individuals within the community, kind of all built around this theme of reconnection and what that means to folks. And that was the theme for this year. The other project I'm thinking about is Citywide Communications, which is a local telecommunications organization. So that, they are your competitor to your Eastlinks or your Bells. And, they offer fast, good quality internet for a far less price. We were able to create a, advertising campaign for them that ran this spring, kind of all built around the insight that, children or young people in the home are oftentimes the most tech savvy. So
Yeah.
perhaps parents should look at those folks as the ones to help make some decisions or help at least guide them in those decisions. And so Little Tech Experts was sort of the characters that we created. And we're excited to kind of take that campaign forward into the fall.
That's a cool campaign.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, thanks.
Interesting spin on that.
That is not the project I thought you were going to talk about.
Please name another one.
Yeah.
What's another one?
There's a long story to this one. This is one we ran before the holidays. I loved it for how rewarding it was and how much I learned running through it. But Sam and I were talking one day about, it's typical for agencies to run some sort of holiday campaign, usually a self-promotion thing, but we don't know how to promote ourselves very well, but we know how to promote other people. And we had this thought for Halifax Mutual Aid, which anonymous organization that helps build crisis shelters for people who have nowhere else to live.
Wow.
The tagline was sort of like, what is a home for the holidays? And we ended up, which was the long version of this. It was difficult to kind of get started with it because it's an anonymous organization, but we saw that as a challenge that we could overcome, and we kind of stuck with it. And we ended up partnering with MetroWorks and Stonehurst Bakery to put together gingerbread kits. And
Nice.
It was dry ingredient for the simple idea that you make your own home for the holidays. So we saw photos on Twitter of people creating like gingerbread apartment buildings
Oh my
or
goodness.
gingerbread whatever. Like I think there was enough in the kit to make like a small town or whatever.
Yeah.
Tearjerker right here.
Yeah. And the whole idea was we were going to sell these kits, and we were extremely transparent with all the costing and where all the money was going towards it. And I think it ended up raising
Around 4,000. I think.
around 4,000, and then we topped it up. But that was something that we had this ambition to get started on it. By the time everything was actually ready to go, we launched it just the first week of December, because it was very difficult to, how do we distribute these when we don't want to ship them and everything. So we ended up partnering with a couple of local businesses to act as pickup locations.
Nice.
So people were able to order online, and then choose their pickup location, and then we tell, like, the store would kind of be like, hey, did you order one? Yeah, and they'd fulfill the orders. And it was a lot of logistics that went in behind the scenes of it, but then it came down to promotion, and the promotional challenge was we weren't allowed to run billboards or do any kind of advertising for an anonymous organization. So it was a lot of social media. Thankfully, they had a pretty good following and pretty good community. But then we also did business with an organization that does postering. So the way we got our message out is, instead of doing billboards, because we weren't allowed to, which, no shade to the billboard people, I completely understand. But they have people that just go out and put up posters, and and it was super fun to kind of drive around the city and be like, there's our poster. It felt kind of a little guerrilla, and it was it ended up being kind of a lot of fun, and it was a pretty big learning experience, and we ended up doing a pretty good donation for them. So
yeah, and I mean, functionally, at the end of the day, we basically just set up a really kind of quick Shopify site.
Yep.
So
Nice.
from a technology side, it was fairly seamless, and that allowed us to kind of do what we needed to do to facilitate it, take in the donations, and exchange that for the kits. And yeah, for us, it was about reframing what the idea of their crisis shelters or this vision of a home is for the holidays, and that's such a topic that I think is still playing out in our city right now. So
Yeah, really hits close to home.
we wanted to just try and find a way to give back in a manner that would assist and, as transparently as possible, be able to give as much money as we can to that organization to facilitate what they need to do to facilitate. But yeah.
I think that's a wonderful example of having a sense of community within this industry, that so much of us are working from home. How fortunate that is to have a home to work from.
Yeah.
And you're finding a way to do something that's meaningful, that uses your talents, and that will make an impact. So that's amazing.
And I remember seeing it, and I when I first saw it, I was like, that is so creative. Like, I would never think about doing like a gingerbread house. And you guys even did like, there's a couple different kits you could get. I think
we wanted to create a kit that was really just dry ingredients. So working with a partner like Metroworks and Stonehearth Bakery, they were able to facilitate getting us all the candy, all the dry goods, and then people just needed to add some of the wet, and essentially we're able to create. So what we did is we gave the recipe out for free, of course, and then we also, because if you couldn't afford necessarily to buy the kit, we didn't want that to be a barrier to anybody who wanted to participate, as well as we created a number of gingerbread plans. So we had like an apartment building, we had like a multi-family, like a duplex, we had a single family home, so that again, it was all about, as well as incorporating a storybook with the parents could kind of read to their children and talk about the issue.
I love that.
So it was about facilitating conversations between kids and parents about what is this issue, and trying to make it a little bit more family friendly and something that can be talked about in a reasonable way.
And also kind of like soften that conversation, and like really make sure that kids are learning about these things and the importance of it.
We also found that as the campaign kind of went on, there was discussion of like, some of these other centers for like women and children, for example, they were like, we'd love to have these. And then you'd see online somebody go, yeah, I just ordered 25, send them over here.
That's awesome.
So like other organizations were even getting these kits on behalf of other people to be able to do themselves. So it was really cool to see like all the community that was actually happening around it. And
Is there... This is not even a segue. It's just completely the next question. I couldn't do that cool thing that Isaac does.
Don't worry about it.
And it's like,
It just ends up happening that way for me.
what's an unspoken rule in like the developer, marketing, tech world, in the business of it, but also just maybe the tech. You can speak to the techiness of it, Peter, and you can maybe speak to the business of it.
I really like that question. I'm gonna sound like I'm trying to be cool here, but like
Be cool.
I've never found myself to be necessarily the rule follower. So, you're bad boy over here, but
Ooh.
but there we go.
We like a bad boy.
There
Yeah.
we go. So like I none immediately come to mind other than like the unspoken rule of if it's on the internet, it's open source. In the sense that like you can write code and do your best to try and make it yours and make it unreplicatable. But as soon as it hits the internet, like people can either A, reverse engineer it, can B, straight up just steal it. Especially if it's like just web code. So like I guess that would be the closest thing to an unwritten rule is it's like don't be precious about your stuff because anybody can take it at any time.
Okay.
I'd just add to that and say I think it's an unfortunate unwritten rule, but there's this kind of preconceived notion that you have to be like, if I don't have the job title of being a creative, or if I don't have the job title of being a developer, I can't have a contribution to the project, for example. So that's oftentimes faced, especially in our world, like, you know, people can be siloed really quickly into different roles. And so I think the unspoken rule is that they're really like anybody can be creative, anybody can be I think technical if you work hard enough at it and you want to be a developer. Like there's no reason why you can't be, but so often, you know, we get into patterns of thinking and working that, oh, this isn't my job, or oh, this isn't the way I need to work. And oftentimes the breakthroughs come when you push past that kind of mental barrier.
That's a good point. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier, that there's this whole stereotype that coders or developers have to be X, Y, Z, and you can't sit with us because you don't understand what I'm doing. And that kind of borrows from what you're saying, because anybody can be a creative, anybody can have like an interesting thought.
Yeah. And also that I think my favorite thing is that so many people don't think coding is an art. It 110% is an art.
Do you think so?
Or maybe.
Hot take.
Yeah. Feel free. I'm more than happy to debate.
Yeah, no, 100%. So there's it is. In fact, if we talk about like not to make this about me again, but
make it about you.
That's why we're here.
That's, I
We're
guess
here
so.
for you. It's the Peter Show.
Yeah.
We're gonna retitle this episode.
Absolutely.
I in high school was lucky enough to have a course in Java development, which is what, like, you know, last year of high school I discovered what writing code looks like, and I was very fortunate because I had no sweet clue what I was going to do after high school. I knew I had to do something because you have to do something. But
Direct quote from your mom.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to have this course. But what I liked about it most was the fact that I didn't ever fancy myself very artistic, but I can problem solve and I can write code and I can figure things out. And through code, I was able to, I mean, in high school, it was stupid stuff I was making, but it was like you could kind of create something, and like there was an art in the, not in my formatting, not in the way my code actually looks, but in what I'm able to create. And the biggest art I find in coding is the problems you're able to solve. And this is, I'm just going to keep going here. I am of the belief that technology is not a showpiece. I am of the belief that technology is a tool. Which doesn't really sound like a hot take. But, you know, when you talk about people saying, like, I built this cool thing and I wrote this cool thing, and it's like cool that you like it, but, like, was it useful? Like, did it change anything for the person who is paying you for it? That's sort of, and that's why Sam and I work well together, is it's like we're both very, it needs to work. And that's ideas, that's code, that's anything. It has to work. It has to make a difference.
I never thought about tech in that way. So thank you.
Yeah. No, well, it is true, because so many people, they get the pedestal out and they're like, look at this cool software I just developed. But then it's like, okay, like, what does it actually do? Like, what can you take that and
What's the
apply
application?
it to? Yeah.
You look at all the websites that are out there right now, that are like winning awards for like this amazing experience and this amazing blah blah blah. Look at how technically fantastic this website is. And it's like I go on them, I'm like, I can't use this. Where am I supposed to be going next? Why when I scroll does it do this? Why is this? And like it's not for everybody. It's like that's okay as like a singular campaign, but if that's my only website, if that's the only way that I'm able to try and get my message out to a customer, it sucks.
One of the things in advertising that's really important for every brand or business out there to think about is the goal of advertising is to make sure that you are easy to think of and easy to buy, right? So if you are not familiar enough to somebody, that's a problem that advertising can solve. Similarly, advertising can help make you easier to buy by pointing out to people where you can be bought or how to buy you.
Yeah.
But as well, it goes back to why, we like to be effective in the work that we do. And that's, I think that's what Peter was getting at as well.
Yeah. So what advice would you give someone who's new to the tech space in Nova Scotia? It's a very loaded question. Lots of potential answers to it.
Yeah, it's hard to think about the individual that is curious. I mean, if they're curious on like the job prospects, for sure. If they're interested, if we're thinking about somebody, whether they're a student or whether they're looking to change careers late in life, whatever. I think the one piece of advice I would say you have to be is persistent, which can be really difficult, especially if you like to sit behind a computer and your social interaction exists through social media. But persistence and kind of putting yourself out there and shooting your shot, asking for something that you really want and being clear and direct about that is really important.
Solid advice.
Yeah.
I have been lucky enough that NSCC has asked me back a few times.
Shout out to NSCC
Shout
while we're
out to
at it, because you
NSCC.
mentioned them so many times.
It's so funny. I own this business, but still imagine myself working for NSCC for some reason. And it's truly because my first year at NSCC, I found an instructor who was incredible. He was brilliant. He delivered on a lot of the non-technical things as well as the very technical thing, because he's like their main IT person in Intro. His name is Sean Morrow, if we can
Shout
plug
out.
that. Sean, I don't know if you'll ever hear this, but
Send him the link to the
I
podcast.
guess I'm going to have to now. But Sean, I think you understand how much I appreciate everything you did for me. But they've invited me back, never for web, which there's another plug, Sean. If you want me to ever come back, please ask me to come back for web. But they've asked me to come back to do mock interviews. So that was the thing that they do. It's usually been game development students that I've been doing it with, but developers nonetheless. So I've been lucky enough to actually see kind of who's coming up and who's kind of like breaking in. I always say the same things to people. It's like, your code is great. Technical skills sound. You can learn them on the job, but it's your soft skills that you need. You got to be able to work with people. You got to be able to, not be that annoying person in the office. You got to, because you are never going to advance the same way as you can as if you're a person first.
Person first. Normalize being
first.
human.
That's
Yeah.
right.
In this industry, yeah.
I think that's our over-encompassing
Yeah.
value for
Theme
this
for-
podcast. Every podcast episode, it's been like, just be human.
Just be human. Well,
Right.
because of the industry we're in.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in like what's the bottom line? What are my numbers? What are we contributing? Is this making sales? Is this selling? Is this appealing? Is this
Yeah.
attractive? But it's human beings behind the screen who are doing these jobs.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's important.
Yeah, the dollars are not the reason to get into the industry. They're there. I'm not going to lie.
Oh.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that the dollars aren't there for
Tell the
tech,
good people.
but they're there. The other thing I will say is there's humility in it to kind of get started. Like, don't assume that you're worth top dollar as soon as you get started, because the reality is if you're untested, if you're a student, you're untested, and the company that hires you is taking a risk.
Facts.
And so appreciate that. Appreciate the companies that offer you a risk, and understand that if you do take a little bit less pay than you're expecting to have, that you're not there the rest of your career. You can do whatever works best for you, but just don't assume that you're worth absolutely everything as soon as you get going.
Wow.
You
Good.
gotta kind of build yourself up.
Yeah.
Solid.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Thank you so much for sharing your time and giving us some really, really good stuff too.
Yeah. No, this was fantastic. We appreciate you both taking the time and having such a insightful conversation on the wild world of shortstop.
Yeah, no, this was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to All Hands on Tech. Interested in learning more? Visit us on our website at www.digitalnovascotia.com. We'll see you next time.
This
has been
a